And now for our keynote speaker, Michael Forzano. Mr. Ferzaan works at Amazon as a software engineer in Seattle, Washington. He graduated from Binghamton University with a degree in computer science and loves creating audio games, one of which I think I play all the time and has been a major time suck. Oh, wait, no, I never mind. Yeah, I love audio games too, so I definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate the work he does with Amazon because I use that site sometimes as well. So without further ado, Mr. Michael Forzano.
This one working? Do you want this one instead? Do you want a handheld mic or do you want a laptop mic? Let's keep it easy.
Hello.
I'm just gonna put this on. Okay. I think that should be good.
All right, thank you. My name is Michael Forzano, and my guide dog Delta is up here with me as well. I want to start out by saying that I've had a really great experience so far at my first Norrie disease conference. It's been really great to meet a lot of the parents who have kids with Norrie, as well as meet other people who have Norrie as well, and just getting to share my experience. And it's really an honor to be here speaking to all of you at this fourth Norrie Disease Association conference here in Boston. I was born in 1991 in Yonkers, New York. I'm my parents' first child. I have a sister who is 4 years younger than me. When I was 2 months old, my mom took me to the pediatrician on a Friday afternoon for what she thought would be a routine appointment. While waiting for the doctor, she thought she noticed something wrong with my eyes. The doctor came in, he agreed, and we were referred to a specialist at Cornell University Hospital in New York City. After that came a long weekend of waiting for our Monday appointments. It so happened that the whole extended family were visiting New York for my baptism. My grandparents, who we called Poppy and Goggy, from Florida. My mom's 2 brothers and their family from Colorado, and my mom's sister and her family, who were also living in Florida at the time. One of my mom's brothers, Steve, is also blind, and everyone wondered, could that mean something? That Monday, my mom, along with Poppy and Goggy, drove me down to the city to see the specialist, who informed them that I was blind. Riding the elevator down after the appointment, Poppy, who was crying, said to my mom, "I'm going to tell you something right now. You better treat this kid like any other kid you'd have, because there's nothing worse than a spoiled brat disabled child." There were a few hard months, but my mom came to terms with the situation. She felt she was chosen in the family to raise a disabled child and was determined to make the best of it. According to my mom, this is how it all began. We were unaware of many others who had Norrie disease. This was before the internet, before the Facebook group was possible, and before the NDA existed. It is truly a great thing that this community now exists, that both parents and people like myself experiencing the condition are able to support one another. I would say one of the most valuable things my parents did for me during my childhood is allow me to participate in many of the same activities that sighted children took part in. I have many fond memories from an early age of playing outside with my sister and the kids in the neighborhood, jumping on our trampoline, swimming in our pool, going fishing with Poppy on his boat in Florida. Once, I accidentally jumped off the side of the trampoline, thankfully landing in a wagon full of dirt. Despite some of these activities being potentially dangerous, I was never told that I couldn't participate. This instilled me with confidence, made me feel included, and set the foundation for my belief that blindness does not need to hold me back. When I was around 3 years old, a teacher of the visually impaired, or TVI, began coming to our house to teach me Braille. I remember being fascinated and eager to learn. And by the time I was 5, I was able to read and write quite well. This was before Braille displays, before it was possible to download books online. So Braille was not that easy to come by. Every few months, my mom would drive me down to the Library for the Blind in New York City. There, we'd pack the car with as many Braille books as we could fit. Finding a specific book that the other kids were reading was often difficult, so we took whatever was available. I suppose it was a good thing, as I was exposed to a variety of different genres and authors. I remember one of the first times I was able to access a new book at the same time as my sighted peers was when the Harry Potter books were published. I had borrowed the first few books from the library and really enjoyed them. As the next books were released, we discovered it was possible to order them from the National Braille Press and have them delivered on the same day that others were lining up at their local bookstores, hoping to grab a copy before they sold out. This was previously unheard of, and I remember how great it felt to be able to participate in that excitement. When the boxes showed up on my doorstep, most of the books spread over 10 or more volumes. I'd read nonstop and finish them in a matter of days. These days, I typically listen to audiobooks, but can honestly say there's nothing like reading a book in hard copy Braille, being forced to fully immerse yourself in the story and imagine your own voices for the characters. Unfortunately, with easier access to audiobooks and synthesized speech, fewer kids are learning Braille than ever before. Instead, they rely on their screen readers to read them information. They struggle with spelling, a necessary skill for doing well in school and in a professional setting. Braille is what makes us literate. I strongly encourage all parents to ensure that your kids are being taught Braille. You may have to fight for it. I was fortunate that the school district in Yonkers provided me with whatever I needed, including Braille and orientation and mobility instruction and expensive assistive technology such as Braille note takers and Braille embosser. Know that you do have the right to these services. There are resources out there to help advocate for them if you need them. I began losing my hearing at age 5. As I later learned, this is unusually early for Norrie disease. Between the ages of 5 and 14, I received about 4 sets of hearing aids, each one more powerful than the last. By the time I was in 8th grade, it became clear that my hearing had deteriorated into the profound range, which made me a candidate for cochlear implants. I was experiencing significant fluctuations in my right and better ear. These are the sudden hearing loss episodes that I'm sure a lot of people with Norrie are familiar with. I would wake up one morning, speech would be distorted and barely intelligible, and it would last for several days. I remember sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner one day, and my mom having to spell out a word that I was unable to hear in the otherwise quiet room. And at that moment, I knew that getting implanted would be the right decision. Hearing aids amplify sound. They can't do much when speech understanding is still impaired, even at the loudest possible volume and with no background noise. I received my first implant in August of 2006, the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of high school. The surgery is relatively minor. I was able to go home on the same day and was fully recovered within a week. When the implant was first activated 3 weeks after surgery, everything sounded like a flock of geese. Training my brain to interpret the new signals was a months-long process. Each day, I would wear the implant without the hearing aid on my other ear for longer periods as time went on, and listen to everything from environmental sounds to others talking. I also worked with an auditory verbal therapist several times a month, where I practiced listening to sounds, to words, phrases, passages, and gradually, the implant started to sound better. I began to comprehend what I was hearing. I remember one day I realized that the voices of my mom, dad, and sister sounded a lot like they used to. My brain had adapted and the robotic quality had disappeared. Within 6 months, I was hearing noticeably better in my implanted ear. I had lost more hearing in my other ear, and my hearing aid was basically useless. So it was a no-brainer to go ahead with a second implant, which I received in April of 2007. So a year after starting the process, I was well adjusted and hearing better than I had for as long as I could remember. Yes, the implants aren't perfect. I still struggle sometimes in noisy situations. Yes, it was really scary to give up my residual hearing, totally going in all on the technology and not totally knowing what to expect. And yes, I could have waited for potential medical advances that could restore my natural hearing. But without the implants, I would likely be completely deaf today. There are many successful deafblind individuals out there, but inevitably they have to give up some of their independence and communicate through an interpreter. Presented with a way to avoid this, I don't regret my decision at all. For many years, I attended a sports camp called Camp Abilities. For a week, I and 50 or so other blind kids took part in activities such as tandem biking, swimming, beep baseball, which is an accessible version of baseball where the ball and the bases beep, enabling blind players to find them. And it was so empowering to be able to participate equally in sports that I was typically left out of in gym class at school. And each year, I left with a renewed sense of confidence. One year, I returned home from camp to find that my parents had got me a tandem bike for my birthday. It was my favorite activity at camp, and my mom had observed that, saw an ad for a bike, and driven upstate to pick it up. At another camp in the Adirondacks called Adirondack Experience, I had the opportunity to rock climb, rappel, navigate through a high rope course, and go ziplining. Being an adventurous person, except when it comes to food, this was an experience I will never forget. It was also really valuable to connect with other blind kids during these camps, kids who were going through many of the same things as I was. When I was in 6th grade, a friend from school asked if I would be interested in joining his Boy Scout troop. I was, but as it turned out, his troop was unwilling to admit a blind person. Likely, they wondered, how could I possibly take part in scouting activities? How could I light a fire, chop wood, or put up a tent when I couldn't see? Dealing with negative perceptions and low expectations of blindness is unfortunately something all of us will encounter throughout our lives. More often than not, with open-mindedness and education, those who doubt us begin to understand that blindness is just an obstacle that can usually be overcome. In this case, though, we found another troop that was willing to accept me as I was without question. The scoutmaster, Joe, never cut me any slack because of my disability. I remember about a month after joining the troop, we were headed on an overnight camping trip, and naturally, I was really excited to go. I took off school on Friday and spent the day shopping for what I thought I would need. I showed up at the church where we met that night, ready for my first camping trip with the boys, and Joe said I wasn't prepared enough to go. My lips quivered as he told me. It was such a letdown after days of anticipation and excitement. Turns out that there was a specific list of items I should have had, one of them being a backpack. I had brought a duffel bag, which is far from ideal from the mile-long hike from the car to the campsite. I took his advice, got what I needed, and was able to go the following month. Joe could have easily felt sorry for the blind kid and let me slide, but he didn't. And looking back, I'm so grateful for that. I went on to serve as a patrol leader, the person in charge of a group of scouts. I had to set up meetings, plan the menus for our camping trips, and ensure that everything got done while there, that the food was cooked, and everything was cleaned up after. Joe initially had some reservations about putting me in this leadership position as a blind person. He planned to put me in another less challenging position that would have still fulfilled my Eagle Scout requirements. But I told him I was up for the challenge, and he gave me a chance. It was a learning experience, but I succeeded. The other scouts grew to respect me as their leader and stepped up to help with tasks that were more easily done visually. I have so many great memories from my time as a Boy Scout. Each summer, the whole troop spent a week at 10 Mile River Scout Camp in upstate New York. One year, I worked on the Wilderness Survival Merit Badge, which required us to build and sweep in a shelter in the woods. We hiked for several miles into the middle of nowhere, cooked burgers and hot dogs in foil over an open fire, and built a shelter around the tree. Before turning in for the night, I turned my hiking boots on their sides to keep them dry just in case it rained. As it turned out, it did rain, and none of the other scouts had thought to take that extra step, so had to wear their soaking wet boots for the hike back to camp. By the time I reached the rank of Eagle Scout, I had earned 33 merit badges, including climbing, hiking, wood carving, and shotgun shooting. As part of the hiking badge, I hiked 20 miles in one day from Alpine, New Jersey, across the George Washington Bridge, and to the church in the Bronx where we met. Near the end of the hike, I was hurting so much, clearly struggling, and a fellow scout offered to carry me the rest of the way. I said, no way. I'd come this far, I would be hiking to the finish line, and I did, and it felt so great. I think I might have started crying there in the parking lot. I was so proud of what I'd accomplished. I've been interested in computers and technology in general from a young age. When I was around 7, my Uncle Steve visited us from Colorado, installed JAWS on my computer, and showed me the basics. From then on, I taught myself as much as I could. I discovered that there were games developed specifically for blind people known as audio games. These games use the stereo field to let blind players know where objects are in the game. For example, a player wearing headphones might hear a sound in their left ear, can control the player using the keyboard to move toward the direction of the sound. I learned that many audio games were created by blind hobbyist developers, and right away, I knew I wanted to be one of them. When I was around 14, I connected with a blind developer from the UK who ran a small company called X-Site Interactive. When I expressed interest in game development, he was happy to show me how he did it, to share the code for his games and point me at resources to learn to program. With his help, I developed my first game, and though it wasn't all that exciting, I published it on his website. To have built something from scratch that others could use after hours spent debugging and struggling to turn my idea into reality gave me an intense feeling of accomplishment. That feeling is still one of the things I enjoy most about my work as a software engineer to this day. When it came time to apply to colleges, I decided to attend Binghamton University and major in computer science. I didn't know precisely what I wanted to do, but I enjoyed programming and figured it wouldn't hurt to give it a try. The major involved a number of math courses, which were quite challenging. I'm grateful that I had the support of the Services for Students with Disabilities office at Binghamton and was provided all of my math textbooks and materials in Braille. The office even purchased an embosser which could produce tactile graphics. Sadly, not all universities have disabilities offices that are as supportive. If you plan on majoring in a STEM field, and that's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, it's definitely something to consider when choosing a school, as having their help made my life so much easier. I was able to focus on my studies, knowing that I would have the materials I needed each semester. Throughout my time in college, I continued my game programming endeavors. Some friends and I started RS Games, a free online gaming platform that offers accessible board, card, and dice games for the blind. I came up with the idea as I was playing an accessible Monopoly game created by another blind developer. The game only allowed you to play against a computer player. I thought it would be awesome if it supported online play. I reached out to the developer and offered to add a multiplayer feature to the game, but he was unwilling to share the code for the game with me. So instead, my friends and I developed our own version of the game, releasing it right before Christmas of 2009. Though we were surprised at how quickly the game took off, we probably shouldn't have been. Nothing like this had ever been done before. And in addition to playing the games, it gave blind people from all over the world the opportunity to connect with one another through the chat functions in the game. Over the years, we continue to add new games and now offer over 20, including Uno, Yahtzee, Blackjack, Rummy, and Apples to Apples, and many more. Some of these games were not previously accessible to the blind at all, even as non-computerized versions. Though I don't have much time to work on it these days, thousands of people still play our games each month. Working on a piece of software that was actually used by others gave me invaluable experience that I couldn't have learned by just completing my coursework. I was much more prepared when I started working in the industry than I would have otherwise been, and I credit having RS Games on my resume for helping me to land the job at Amazon. At Binghamton, I was 3 hours away from home, close enough to go home for the weekend if I wanted to. Being away from home really helped me to step out of my comfort zone and enabled me to be more independent. I was somewhat of a loner in high school. I didn't really put in the effort to make new friends and felt left out of social events outside of school and on the weekends. In college, I made friends with people in my dorm, at the dining hall, and in my classes. I joined the pep band, where I played the saxophone at Binghamton Bearcats basketball games. I got lost a lot and struck up conversations with people who offered to help me out. I even partied a bit, like most kids in college do. I would not have had many of these experiences had I commuted to college from home. It was such a great decision to go away, despite the challenges of adjusting to living on my own far away from family. After my freshman year, I made the decision to apply for a guide dog. I'm a dog person. I've always had 2 pet dogs in the house growing up, and I always enjoyed seeing my Uncle Steve's guide dogs whenever he'd visit. When I was in high school, I spent a weekend at the Seeing Eye in Morristown, New Jersey, where I had the chance to work with a dog and experience just how much more efficient it was. So I put in my application to Guiding Eyes for the Blind in Yorktown Heights, New York. Just half an hour away from where I grew up in Yonkers. There are about a dozen schools across the country that provide guide dogs free of charge to the blind, including travel expenses to and from the school. But my family had socialized puppies for Guiding Eyes when I was in middle school. We took 6-week-old puppies home for 3 to 5 days, played with them, held them, and gave them important early socialization that lays the foundation for their training as guide dogs. It was that familiarity with the school and knowing that they were only a half hour away if I needed anything that drove me to get a dog from them. After a home interview to evaluate my cane skills and what I was looking for in a dog, I was accepted to train in June of that year. I was matched with Delta, who after 8 years is still working with me today. Training involves almost 4 weeks at the Guiding Eyes campus to familiarize me with working with a dog and get us used to each other. We trained in many different environments, from the streets of White Plains to country roads in Yorktown, and near the end of my stay, the trains, subways, and the streets of New York City. Working with Delta has been amazing. I walk much faster as she guides me around obstacles without me having to find them with my cane, which would inevitably slow me down. I can teach her to find familiar places and landmarks. Though Delta doesn't tell me where to go, rather relying on me to direct her with commands like left and right, she can navigate a familiar route, like from my apartment building to the office, without much direction from me. When we travel, she learns how to find my hotel room after doing it only a couple of times. And of course, it's so awesome having a dog by my side 24/7. Aside from being a great companion, she helps me meet people. She's quite the chick magnet. During my junior year of college, I began my job search in hopes of landing an internship that summer. I had participated in a research experience for undergraduates program at Binghamton the previous summer. One of the goals of the program is to encourage participants to consider graduate studies in computer science. I considered it an option, but felt working in the industry would be a better fit for me, knowing that I could have more of an impact developing real solutions instead of just writing papers. I was encouraged by a friend to apply to Amazon, which was recruiting interns directly from Binghamton. I honestly didn't think I was good enough for Amazon, being one of the top tech companies to work for. I figured, why not? Wouldn't hurt to apply. A few weeks later, I was scheduled for an in-person interview, which took place on the Binghamton campus. I had just interviewed with and been rejected from Facebook, so my expectations going in were pretty low. I did not inform Amazon in advance that I was blind. I walked into the room and asked the interviewer if it was okay that I wrote code on my laptop and emailed it to him after the interview. He agreed, and there was no further discussion of my blindness. I left the interview feeling that, surprisingly, it went pretty well. A week later, I received a call that had been accepted for an internship in Seattle that summer. Moving to an unfamiliar city by myself for the summer was pretty challenging at first, especially considering my lack of experience with independent city travel. I remember how frustrated I was trying to learn how to get from my hotel to the office the day before I was to start work, and struggling to navigate through construction and closed sidewalks. I had to admit to myself that I just couldn't learn it in time and took a cab to work on my first day. Thankfully, a coworker showed me an alternate and more direct route, and I was able to get to and from work independently by the end of my first week. As the summer progressed, I gained more confidence to explore the city on my own. For my internship, I worked on the textbook rentals team, developing a service that sent out email reminders to students returning their textbooks. The textbook rental program launched during my internship, and it was really cool to be able to contribute to a brand new Amazon service. My boss liked what he saw, as on my last day, he told me that I would be receiving an offer to return to Amazon full-time after graduation. I remember when I called my mom to tell her I had gotten the offer, she started crying right there on the phone. She was proud of me, and I was proud of myself. I never could have imagined going to work at one of the top, most desirable tech companies to work for, but there I was. I also never could have imagined moving across the country to Seattle. I always figured I would work in New York City. I had nothing else lined up and really enjoyed Seattle during my summer there. So it was really a no-brainer to accept the offer and give Seattle a try. I'm still there 5 years later. At Amazon, I now work on the website accessibility team, where I develop tools to help other teams who work on the features of the Amazon website to ensure that their web pages are accessible, both to blind people using screen readers and people with other disabilities, customers for which Amazon is a game changer in terms of independence. Now, instead of going to a store, having someone walk me around and describe everything to me, I can log on to Amazon and have access to all information about a product. It's awesome to be able to contribute to making sure that that experience is accessible. Moving to a new city, knowing virtually no one, isn't easy for anyone. I felt pretty lonely at first. My apartment building had a rooftop deck where residents would often socialize. I made friends there that I still keep in touch with to this day. I got comfortable with the idea of going places by myself. For example, to a bar for dinner or a drink. In terms of meeting people, it's definitely hit or miss, but that's okay. I realized that I didn't need to let not having someone to go with stop me from doing something that I wanted to do. As it turns out, there are quite a few young blind professionals living in Seattle, in the Seattle area. Some who also work for tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. I had never had blind friends that I hung out with regularly, and it wasn't something I actively sought out. But it has been really nice to be part of a group of friends that experience similar challenges. Soon after we met, one of my friends encouraged me to become a member of the National Federation of the Blind, or NFB, which, for those who don't know, is one of the two major advocacy organizations led by blind people in the US. I honestly had no interest in joining one of these organizations. The NFB in particular has some misconceptions surrounding it. I had heard they were against guide dogs, spent their time suing companies for the smallest accessibility violations just to line their pockets, and were judgmental of people who would ask for help with tasks like navigating an airport or cutting their food. When I finally agreed to attend a meeting of the local Seattle chapter in January of 2015, I quickly found that these things couldn't be further from the truth. Like every group, there are some members who are judgmental, and some of the other rumors I had heard might have been true years ago. But nowadays, I found them to be a great organization that does important advocacy work to enable blind people to succeed. At one of my first meetings, one of the board members of the chapter waited at a nearby bus stop to help someone who wasn't familiar with the area find the meeting place. I was struck by how welcoming the members were. They were willing to help anyone who needed it, wherever they might be in their journey toward independence. The NFB's motto reads, "The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day, we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back." This motto and the overall philosophy of the organization guides them in their efforts to empower the blind to fulfill their dreams. The organization runs 3 training centers: the Colorado Center for the Blind, Louisiana Center for the Blind, and Blind Inc. in Minnesota. These centers provide the best blindness skills training available, teaching a variety of skills from orientation and mobility to Braille to cooking. O&M at the center is taught using a method known as structured discovery, in which students are given the tools they need to learn about their surroundings as they go, rather than being taught only the specific routes that they need to know, as is done traditionally. These tools could be using GPS apps on an iPhone, going into a nearby business to ask for directions, or even using the sun to determine your direction of travel. At the end of the training, students are dropped off somewhere and have to figure out where they are and navigate back to the center independently. Cooking is taught using similar methods, leading up to cooking a meal for 40 fellow students independently. Many of the instructors are blind themselves, which in itself really helps to build confidence. I consider myself pretty independent, but if I was in a position to take off the required 9 months, I would consider attending one of these centers. The NFB does file a fair number of lawsuits in their efforts to break down barriers that prevent us from being on an equal playing field. These lawsuits are justified, coming after efforts by individuals to work with companies to have their concerns addressed. I was so excited when Uber, the ride-sharing company, first launched in Seattle. For a reasonable price, I could get from point A to point B just by calling a car from my iPhone. In most major cities, I only have to wait a matter of minutes. It was almost like having my own car. Except it wasn't, as I quickly realized, because many drivers took issue with transporting my guide dog. And these drivers were not penalized at all by the rideshare companies. They made little effort to educate drivers of their obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, instead taking the position that drivers were contractors, so it was not their problem. I'd been late to meetings, even almost missed a flight, as drivers saw Delta, canceled the ride, and drove off, leaving me with a cancellation fee and to wait for another ride. I was put in contact with a manager at Uber in Seattle and attempted to work with them to improve the situation. I'm sure many others did the same. Only after years of being ignored by Uber and Lyft did the NFB file lawsuits. Similar comprehensive settlements were made with both companies. They required drivers to agree to transport service animals before they can drive and implement a process for reporting and potentially firing drivers who refuse to transport them. There has been significant improvement since the settlement. I'm still denied rides occasionally, but I can at least be confident that the drivers will face consequences or at least receive further training from Uber and Lyft. Aside from ride sharing, the NFB advocates for accessibility in higher education and employment, for access to Braille, and for the right of guide dog users to fly without providing documentation in advance. A policy would have required this that was going to be implemented by Delta Airlines, but was changed thanks to our efforts. And they advocate for website accessibility. I'm proud to be a part of an organization that does so much to improve the lives of the blind. Through the NFB, I met successful blind individuals who often travel independently, both here in the US and internationally. Though I've always enjoyed traveling, I've never traveled internationally before last year. And there were situations where I was not as independent as I could have been. Take traveling through an airport, for example. In the past, I would have arrived at the airport and waited around for an airport worker to assist me through security and to my gate. The majority of the time, the assistant would arrive pushing a wheelchair, and I would have to explain to them that though I was blind, I was perfectly capable of walking on my own. Though well-intentioned, these airport workers lack the training to work effectively with people with disabilities and end up adding a lot of frustration and stress to my travel experience. So I realized that traveling through airports independently was not as difficult as I had realized. After all, many other blind individuals did this successfully all the time. Usually, I ask people along the way questions like, which way is security? Or am I near the B gates? Most people are happy to help. Often, I meet people along the way who are headed in the same direction and strike up a conversation. It's a great way to meet people. I also have the freedom to explore the airport, to stop and grab food or coffee before my flight without feeling like I'm inconveniencing someone. This March, 2 of my blind friends and I took a trip to England and Ireland. Going into this, I was honestly a bit apprehensive. How would we stay together while navigating the tube and the streets of London? How would Delta react to the many differences in how things are laid out in the UK compared to the US? For example, roundabouts are really common over there, something I've never encountered here. Though it wasn't always easy, we had an amazing time. I did lose my friends in the tube station on the way to visit the Palace of Westminster. But I knew where I was going. I got on the next train and was able to call them and reconnect with them once I exited the station. There were intersections that I didn't feel comfortable crossing myself, so I just asked someone for help. Things took longer than usual. It takes time to figure out where to go when you don't have access to visual indicators like signs, and especially in an unfamiliar country. I realized as the trip progressed that it was best to relax and go with the flow, and that it was okay that we wouldn't be able to do as much as we had hoped. Everything is part of the experience. I'm so glad I went and look forward to many more exciting travel adventures. There is no doubt that we live in the best times to be blind. While technology has simplified everyone's lives, it's had a particularly profound impact for us, giving us access to visual information that was previously not accessible without sighted assistance. When Apple released their built-in screen reader for the iPhone called VoiceOver in 2009, many were skeptical. Could a blind person really use a touchscreen efficiently? As it turned out, using Apple's innovative gesture-based system to navigate the screen, we could. Later on, they even added the ability to type in Braille on the touchscreen, allowing me to type perhaps even faster than someone who is sighted. Many companies have stepped up and developed apps designed specifically for the blind. With an app called Seeing AI, released by Microsoft last year, I can point my phone's camera at a document, say a letter I received in the mail, and have it read out to me. I can identify money or the color of my shirt. It can even do basic scene recognition. So for example, tell you that this is an image of 3 people sitting in a living room. This is technology that's in its infancy and is likely to improve in the coming years. Another app called Nearby Explorer is a GPS app that, in addition to the typical turn-by-turn directions, tells me about places I'm passing by and my distance to upcoming intersections. For example, it might say 2nd Avenue left and right side in 50 yards. GPS apps designed for the sighted typically display information on a map, which a screen reader is unable to read. A more perhaps controversial app that has been quite popular in the blind community since its release last year is called Aira, a service that connects you with an agent who, through your phone's camera or a pair of smart glasses, can see what you would be seeing and help with any task you need to accomplish. Anything from describing your surroundings to navigating an airport to reading the screen on a thermostat. The possibilities are endless. But the service is currently pretty costly with plans starting at $89 a month. I personally struggle with the idea of paying for equal access, but nevertheless, it's exciting to see that this technology is available and to see how it will evolve in the coming years. Norrie disease is a complex condition affecting everyone in different ways. But blindness is honestly not that bad. Maybe one day there will be a way to restore my vision, and perhaps I choose to do it. That's not something I think about often. Rather, I focus on what can be done and what is being done to make our lives easier, to break down the barriers that stand between us and our dreams. Hearing, on the other hand, has been more of a struggle. I went through nearly losing all of my hearing and having it restored by my cochlear implants. Though the technology is always improving, with new equipment released every few years, the implants still fall short of natural hearing in some ways. Hearing conversations when there is background noise remains the biggest challenge. My latest set of implants, which I received a couple of months ago, are a drastic improvement. Voices are clearer, and the noise processing technology is better at filtering out background noise so that I can understand the people around me. I can also finally wear the implants in water, meaning I no longer have to miss out on conversations while swimming. That said, I'd still jump at the chance to have my natural hearing restored. I'd like to end with some advice for all of the parents here who are raising kids with Norrie disease. First, it's so important to do what you can to help your kid to grow into a competent blind person. Being blind isn't easy sometimes. Every day, I encounter sighted people who have never met a blind person before. Some are naturally uncomfortable around things that are different to them, and perhaps are even afraid to talk to me. Others feel sorry for me because they can't imagine how we could possibly cope with something they perceive to be so debilitating. I have to constantly educate on how I complete basic tasks and spread the message that we're just people who happen to do things a little differently. In order to say that, your child needs to feel confident that it's true. The bottom line, they need to learn to love life and love themselves. It's also important to give your kids a chance to experience the many joys of life. As I told all of you today, I've had so many great experiences that most might think are impossible for someone who is blind to do. Seek out opportunities for them to try new things, and not just those that involve activities specifically designed for blind people. At the end of the day, we live in a sighted world. We can't always surround ourselves with what we're most comfortable with. That's just not reality. Finally, stay positive. There will be many, many struggles. Don't be hard on yourself. All you can do is your best. It will be enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Here, I'm gonna clip this back on you while you're doing questions. Sure.
Hey, good morning, Michael. What's your specific tech kit right now? Like iPhone, do you use a Trek, Braille Note, what computer? Just what are you carrying around?
So yeah, I use an iPhone at work and at home. I use a Windows computer running the NVDA screen reader. I also use a Braille display, and those are the main things. And I'm able to pair my Braille display with the iPhone or the computer, and read Braille and as well as write in Braille.
Hi, Micah. This is Deborah Pickens. I'm the mother of a son with Norrie's disease, 21 years old. And my question for you is, what assistance did you receive from Vocational Rehabilitation while you were looking for employment?
So when I was in elementary, middle, and high school, most of the assistance I got was from the school district. When I went to college, VR provided assistance with paying for college, with providing all my assistive technology, my Braille Note, computer, embosser. Honestly, they offered me assistance, helping me write my resume, helping me search for jobs. But I ended up, just doing that on my own. I didn't really take that assistance. When I did get the job at Amazon before, they closed my case, they did purchase me an iPad and a Braille display, which, I can use at work.
Hi, this is Paul Stepanczyk. My son is Aaron Stepanczyk. I just had a question. Were you nervous doing your speech today?
Yes. Yes, I was. Even though it was all written out, I just had to read it. I was still nervous.